We're full of time. We're in the moment, and we're back for part 2 of what it means to live in Kairos and not in Chronos. And these are not places.
Have you ever seen the way there's a YouTube video how they build a Rolex watch, like the 40 grand ones?
It's
and stuff.
Amazing to watch those Swiss watchmakers just like work on this like little wood block to put this stuff together. And then you have the body going through the machining of a special type of aluminum stainless steel alloys that they have. It's incredible.
Yeah, I was watching one, and there was a certain watch, and it took 2 years to make. You know, and it was like 300,000 or something like that. And I was like, the time that was put into making something perfect.
Yeah.
To create a moment of value, and then to create a moment, you know, that person that can afford that watch being able to wear it on their wrist and look at it.
And every time they look at it, they feel that moment.
Yeah.
But it took some work, and it takes reflection, and it also takes a breath to like look at it and be like, wow.
Because I guarantee you, whatever brand it was, you know, some Swedish brand, whatever brand it was, they're not going to put out a product that's not close to perfect.
Yeah. Patek Philippe.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Belovas, whatever the hell it might be. But, you know, we define perfection a lot of the time as, you know, well, was it perfect in that we spent this time and got this outcome from it?
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you should look at perfection? It's perfection, or is perfection a function of I am in this moment and I learned exactly what needed to be learned. I made the perfect choice, even though it might have been a choice that was negative or harmed me. I learned a lot from it. So was it perfect to be in that moment and be like, should I do this or that? Which cause do I want to take?
The choice becomes perfect when you learn.
When you learn.
Even though you may view it as a bad choice, if you learn from it, then that wisdom comes from that. That's the only way, for me, that's really the only way I get wisdom is when I screw something up.
Right. And so we should have a deep sense of focus on moments of choice.
Mm-hmm.
Not time. I'm not focusing on time or my choices in time. I'm focusing on the choice of that moment because there's a lot to be learned from it. So let's start to dip into Kairos. Back to this article. And I want to go through, there's a little bit of like a descriptive dialogue between someone asking Kairos why he looks a certain way when we're looking at the piece of artwork for how the artist was like designing it.
Right.
And there's a lot to be learned here when we just take a moment to realize the teaching aspect of it.
Yeah, and in the article it talks about Kairos being a young man, little and handsome.
Mm-hmm.
So I want us to think of Chronos, you know, like Grim Reaper looking old man. And then we see this young, so opposite Kairos.
Kairos is in youth. It's high energy. There's dynamicism to it.
And Kairos, you can find all of the Greek peninsula. You can also see his hair is long at the front, and he has shaved bald at the back, so almost like a mullet.
It's worse than a mullet. It's strictly only the front.
Yeah.
And it's completely shaved off in the back.
So that's interesting that if you want to get into that allegory.
Yeah.
About looking back.
Well, we'll describe that once you read the sort of poem that comes with this.
Who and whence was the sculptor? And then asks the question and his name. And who are you? And then he says, time who subdues all things.
Yeah.
Why do you stand on tiptoe? I am ever running.
Yeah. So they're describing, they're describing Kairos.
Right.
And who has designed Kairos? Time itself has artistically shaped what Kairos is. So it's like time is shaping this and Kairos is shaping time. They play off of one another. And he's constantly in movement. Do moments constantly come and go?
Yes.
All the time. Moments are always happening. And so there's a dynamic nature to how the positioning, the juxtaposition of how we describe either in an artistic format or in a linguistic format for Kairos. So it said he's on his tiptoes, correct?
Right. He's and then they said, why do you stand on tiptoe? And he said, I am ever running.
Always running.
Right.
Never stops. And running means there's a pace. It's, you know, you can't catch up to it. It's just that movement's always happening. Once that train starts, there's no stopping it.
Yeah. And when you're living by moment to moment to moment to moment to moment, and you're living in each of those moments, being ever present, and you have a purpose that is good and right, and that has been given to you to work, you're going to have this energy that's going to be able to, if you're fighting time in this Chronos matter, you're always going to feel lazy, drained. I don't want to do this. I'm not, in the mood. I'll work through it. I'm going to discipline myself.
Yeah, you're taking steps to death rather than running to life.
Yes, exactly.
And it's interesting that he's on his tiptoes running. Mm-hmm. So every time your foot touches the ground, that's a moment. Mm-hmm. And when it leaves it, it's a moment. Mm-hmm. It's moment, clawing after moment, after moment, after moment. It's taking those steps.
Yeah, and he said, and why do you have a pair of wings on your feet? So his wings were on his feet. Mm-hmm. He said, I fly with the wind.
He flies with the wind. Wind is interesting. If you stand outside, no same wind particle is going to come back and hit you. It's extremely dynamic. It carries across with the movements of creational energy in our universe. It passes by, and you'll never be able to capture it again. That moment comes by as briefly as a wind comes across your back. So when he moves with the wind, he moves with that dynamic nature of life and creation. And there's a deep respect for that, rather than saying, here's start, here's finish. What are you going to move with? Well, there's no moving with anything. It's just saying that the universe starts at this point and stops at this point. That's what Chronos is saying. And this one's saying, I am everywhere, moving all the time.
Yeah,
it's that dynamic nature.
And I think this is interesting when you talk about wind. And, in the beginning, he said, time who subdues all things. Then he says, I fly with the wind. Yeah. So when we're looking at being a slave to time with Chronos, and then with Kairos, we see us flowing with it.
Yeah, we're not going against nature. We're moving with nature.
Right.
When we're in the moment, we're with creation, not fighting it. I love the personification that they do here of what Kairos is. And this is an interesting aspect of the Greeks, and how we can then assimilate with what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, they philosophized this. They would spend probably years going over all this.
Well, they loved logic.
Right.
And logic is inherently truthful. It's rational. And if creation's rational, well, then they're describing what creation is.
Yes. And why do you hold a razor in your right hand? As a sign to men that I am sharper than any sharp edge.
Yeah. We talked about in the first episode that you own nothing else in this life except for that sliver of a moment, that photo frame, that razor sharp split piece of time, that fraction of a second. And that moment, him holding that razor, he is that sharp. It is that fine. It is that precise, because that's all it is, that moment that you own. And within that moment, there's also another metaphor of that razor, is that you can fall to either side of it. Mm-hmm. What choice do you want to make? Here is the finest piece, finest line of that moment. Are you going to make the choice in that moment to do something good and evolutive, or something negative and de-evolutive? You need to live in that moment, reflect, and learn on it, because it's a very sharp, very definitive decision. Because if you've taken the time to reflect on it, to find balance on that razor, you can choose the path you want to take.
What scared me about this statement was how many sharp edges there are out there, and where our view could be that we're on a sharp edge. But he said, no, I'm the sharpest.
He is the sharpest.
Yes.
That moment is the sharpest. It's not physically being somewhere. It's that perception internally for you of choice. It's that free will of you balancing on that razor and saying, here is the sharpest moment in time. What choice do I want to take from learning in this moment? That's what it is.
Yeah, because being deceived is so easy. I mean, that's where, when we look at the Old Testament and we see Adam and Eve and Satan came.
Yeah, remember that, and the apple and all that other stuff.
And deceived, that was the big word. It deceived me into taking something that I thought was good for me in that moment.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, at that moment, without having any care or worry, I decided to take this.
Well, it was a perception.
It was a sharp edge. It looked good at the moment.
And I was told that I would have knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I'm expecting something in the future.
Yes.
I live in a life of expectation rather than a life of enjoying the moment.
Yep. That's where I was going. Perfect. Yep.
Okay. And so where does that then lead to the next one?
And why does your hair hang over your face? For him who meets me to take me by the forelock.
When a moment comes, you have the choice to recognize it or not recognize it. Take its value and learn from it or not learn from it. So when you're faced with a moment, faced with choice, faced with that time dilation where time stands still, what are you going to do? Because when it passes, you got no hair to grab onto. It's not, you know, and I gave this metaphor for you. In the NFL, your hair is also a piece of your jersey. So if it's out of the helmet, someone can grab onto it. They can try and catch that moment because it's run by them. They're chasing that person down. You can't do that with Kairos. Kairos leaves you nothing to grab onto. I will meet you face to face, but once you've made the decision to accept or ignore, after you've ignored it, there's no going back. The moment's gone forever. It moves with the wind, always running. So you're going to step up to it and make that choice, that razor sharp choice within that still moment, that stillness of creation, or will you let it pass?
Yeah, and I like the explanation. I mean, listen to this. And why, in heaven's name, that's funny, you know, it's almost like a satire, is the back of your head bald? Because none whom I have once raced by on my wing feet will now, though he wishes it sore, take hold of me from behind.
Yeah, because when you miss it, you're like, crap, that opportunity's gone. And then in that reflection, you're like, I can never get that back.
No.
And you know, people have like feel those senses of regret.
Yeah, on their deathbed.
It's because they only started to realize the moment too late, rather than always living in the moment.
That's truth. I mean, when you look at it, it's you know, we were talking about productivity, and I was thinking of a grandmother with her granddaughter watching a cartoon for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
That there's absolutely no work value in that.
No.
But would that grandmother want to replace that time where she's laying on the couch snuggling with her granddaughter?
Never.
Exactly.
For nothing.
Because
there's nothing you could get, not any amount of money in the world would have her trade that out.
Because the grandmother realizes how she was as a mother. You know, like grandmas are always, you know, better than your mom. You know what I mean? When you always want to go to grandma's house, yeah, you know, our grandpa's house, whatever it may be, you know, but all it is a wiser, older mom.
Yeah.
You know, and so they, if you ask any, I've talked to older people and they're always like, which I'm not that far behind, but they're always like, you know, I'm learning to love all over again. I'm learning to love my son or my daughter, and I'm learning to love my grandkids because of this ability to be able to have this wisdom over all, and they'll say time, but it's really over all the moments.
Yeah.
And then you see, I don't have much time in my life, you know, if we look at, you know, our avatar.
Yeah.
And then we look at it and say, okay, you know, I'm going to enjoy these 30 minutes. I don't really give a whatever. I'm going to watch this silly cartoon and just enjoy this moment of feeling, you know, true love.
I've recognized my finality, and it has altered my perspective of how I want to live my life. So now I want to live in the moment. And what I want to bring awareness to is do not wait until the end to change that perspective. Do not wait until Chronos, death, stares you in the face and you say, now I want to do something meaningful. Think about your death. Think about time now and say, how do I live with Kairos? How do I live within the moment? How do I live in a creational aspect, a rational, logical, truthful perspective of life, an evolutive version of life right now? Do not wait to try and figure that out later.
No, and this was interesting. They asked the question, why did the artist fashion you?
Yeah.
This is to me, and I want you to look at a lens on this as creation, because why did the artist fashion you? So when creation is fashioning something for your sake. And then he says this, and this word is still intriguing me, and I need to do more research on this. He said, for your sake, stranger. And he set me up in the porch as a lesson.
Yeah. Life is all about learning. Our evolution is about learning. Our spirit wants to focus on these moments of this life while this material body is bound to Chronos. And when a stranger It doesn't matter who it is, rich, poor, it's regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Irregardless isn't a word. Regardless of who it is, it affects all of you. So do you want to learn from this? And why does creation fashion you up on this porch? Why were you even made for this? Because within that learning lesson, this is not something to hide. It's something to elevate and look to say, it needs to be learned from. It's on that porch. It's not inside the house, hidden behind the door.
Right.
It's wide out in the open. Lift it up. Elevate it so you can be like, this is something we need to strive to achieve. It's not on my level. It's elevated above the land. How do I get to that point of elevation? And everything is a function of thought. Why were you fashioned this way? It's because creation has come together either through a person or itself to say, this is materially the best representation of these truths. That's why the hair is strictly in the front, bald in the back, wings on the feet, running on the toes. All of these things are speaking about these great truths.
Yeah, and through these great truths, when we look at all these stories, and you and I, we really love the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
The hero's journey is defined in moments. And when you look at each of these moments, whether you may meet a sage, a shaman, whoever it may be, and then you learn this great wisdom, and then it helps you, divert from this path and go to this one. Because I'm still stuck on the stranger word. And I like how I'm a stranger to it. It's actually comforting to me. Like, it's not...
You're a stranger in mind, and you're also a stranger in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You've never met this thing.
Yes.
You're coming to it inquisitive.
Mm-hmm.
You don't understand it intellectually yet because you haven't thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
So you really are a stranger. You're posing these questions.
You're a stranger in every moment.
Yeah, and it brings in that being a stranger in that moment says, how do I remove myself from the ego?
Yes.
And really learn from what's happening here?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to take the moment head on and be like, okay, I'm going to accept that risk as a stranger, completely unknowing, and say, what can I learn right now?
Yeah, and I was just going to mention that. This is funny, we're in sync. Where the Chronos is all about comfort and trying to manufacture comfort. The Kairos is all about that young, fleeting, just, kind of novelty type, take risks.
Mm-hmm.
And even thinking about it puts a smile on your face because you're like, yeah, and when we look at entrepreneurship or we look at any of those, it's always that ability to be able to take that gamble, to take that risk, to, and not just for a payout, but it's the whole hero's journey of if I fight this battle and I learn from it on the other side, who am I going to be?
Yeah, that's it. Razor edge moment.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot balancing on this very fine moment in time. What are we going to do? All I own is this razor. Nothing else.
Nothing else.
I don't own the future. All I know is that there's a choice to be made and something to be learned.
Yeah, I want to get into Kairos and other cultures. This was a really interesting article. Ancient Indians had a similarly divided notion of time. And like the Greeks, they distrusted Chronos. Notice that they distrusted Chronos. The Sanskrit equivalent of Chronos is Kala, from which the destructive goddess Kali takes her name.
Yeah, destructive.
Yeah, and I like her image.
Yeah, time eats all. It destroys all. That's what it is. Time is the ender of all things. It's definite. It's sure. But those are those definitive aspects. And even in Sanskrit, the old Vedic culture, they're like, oh, how do I not live in those destructive moments? That destructive timeline? How do I be in the moment? Well, that's why they always function, like, let's meditate. Let's move to the meditative state, that state of timelessness.
Yes.
That state of the one total, perpetual moment that needs to be focused on. If I have a train of thoughts, it's like boxcar 1, 2, 3, 4, it's moving at 60 miles an hour. Stop the train. Focus on that one boxcar. Meditate within it. And that's why you have the Sanskrit term of Kala.
And then is it Ritu? Ritu? R-I-T-U is the Sanskrit word for qualitative time, like Kairos.
Yeah, Ritu. Ritu is the aspect of qualitative time. Arahat Atharsata is one that is in Ritu. It's always watching time. It watches the moment rather than being consumed by it.
Yeah, and in my neck of woods, in Christian theology, Kairos has a sense of ripeness, and you can see that if you look in the Greek, they use these. In our English version, it'll just say time.
Yep.
But you got to look it up, and you can use the Strong's Concordance to do this. You can look the word up and then see in the Bible, anytime it says time, see if it's talking chrono or kairos.
Yeah, you got to go back to the before it was translated.
Yeah, and so
someone just does a general translation.
And Solomon wrote in the book of Ecclesiastes, he wrote this: to everything there is a season and a time, which is kairos, to every purpose under the heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up, that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal.
Yeah. Each of those are moments of choice, and they're going to happen.
Right.
So where's the richness, the ripeness within that moment that you're going to recognize and learn about? Learn about death. Learn about healing. Learn about the seasons. People are like, I love the fall. But then they're like, well, now that it's fall, winter's coming. No, just focus specifically on that moment of the leaf on the tree changing that color. What is that enjoyment? What does that actually bring you? Be with it. Move with those fall winds.
Yes.
Okay? Don't fight them.
Yeah, and she gets a little philosophical, and I kind of want to, work on this for a few minutes because I think it's very interesting. She says we are told not to expect perfection, and I went back and I go back to look at that grandmother, watching that Disney cartoon with their granddaughter, and them snuggling on the couch or whatever. That's perfection.
Is that not perfection?
Yeah.
Don't expect perfection?
Right.
Who is it to define whether something was perfect or not? Or you and I having this episode of this, emotional thought connection was not perfect. Who's to say that it needed to be any better?
Yeah. The moment.
Why are you measuring it?
Yeah.
To say that it's something that has to be measured.
Yes.
You're removing it from the moment then.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer a function of moment within its own perfection of being a moment. Now you've said it's just something material, and let's look at the time value of it.
Yeah, because that razor's edges can also be, there's a dichotomy to it in the sense of if you're so focused on chrono, you're missing that moment. How many times have we been dismissive of, our children or our dog or, and there's a moment that could have been created, and then we've turned around and because we're busy, how many of us are so busy that we just don't have any of these, what we would consider perfect moments.
Yeah. And that's why, I've been thinking about this a lot, especially after we had that other episode we talked about dogs and wolves and, evolution of the spirit. I said, is it really that important for me to get 30 extra minutes of sleep? Or should I just wake up at the ass crack of dawn and have a moment with the dogs and give them what they need, to be with them, to walk them outside, to watch, dawn happen, watch the sun rise over a mountain. And that is a greater moment than saying, I have 30 minutes. What can I gain from this extra 30 minutes? Yeah,
because you could look at it and say, okay, I have 30 minutes. I need to wear out the dogs. The dogs need to have some exercise. It's cold outside. I need to put these clothes on. And then, I'm not going to look at the sunset because I'm running with the dogs or I'm walking really briskly with them because they need to exercise. Oh, okay, I'm not present with the dogs because I'm thinking about the 3 meetings that I have for the day and what I'm going to say in each of those meetings.
Correct.
You see how that moment becomes that evil father time comes in with his sickle, I guess, or whatever you would.
And you're enslaved by those train of thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You're enslaved by the chronology.
Mm-hmm.
Let it go. That's what I'm saying. I'd rather take the 30 minutes of moments rather than the 30 minutes of time. And I think that's how we're going to start describing things. It's how many moments do you have to share with us? Not how much time do you have to share with us? That's going to be our new thing. You want to coin that right here? How many moments do you want to share with us?
But it needs to be all that way. You need to look at your day and say, not how productive I was, but how many great moments that I had where I lived in my purpose.
Yeah. Moments of thought, moments of feeling, moments of sharing, moments of unity, moments of love, moments of understanding.
Then that creates a successful day based off of those
regardless of any material outcome. That's the most successful day you could ever have.
Because how many like you in the bathrobe, we talked about this, you in the bathrobe creating Tartle, that took, 2 hours to write everything out, to think about it? I mean, how long did it take you that day, that specific moment?
To write all those...
45 minutes, 2 hours, 4 hours?
To write like 20 pages straight, it took me about 2 hours but it was in the zone. It was pure...
Oh, yeah, see, this is what we're going to get into. Yeah.
It was a moment.
So
it was a large moment of time where it was just there. I wasn't thinking about how long it was going to take. I just knew that after the 25 pages were complete, 2 hours had gone by, and I'm just flowing.
Yeah, and those 2 hours of your life,
Mm-hmm.
of Alexander McCaig's life, could be the most important time that you've ever experienced
Could
for
be
your life.
the most important moment I ever experienced.
Yes, the most important moment.
And
So,
in a moment that I could share with you,
mhm.
with what you're doing now, and all these other people across the globe. They can feel and touch in that moment. They can share in that moment, they can be a part of that moment. You can't go back in time to the past.
No.
But you can live in that moment that's being carried. It's like, here's the picture, and I'm going to share that picture with all of you.
Yeah, and Rainier Maria wrote letters to a young poet and said this: "In this, there is no measuring with time. A year doesn't matter, and 10 years are nothing. Being an artist means not numbering and counting, but ripening like a tree."
Yeah. It's not about, the picture is not about just the straight lines, right? It's the richness of color that goes into it. The darkness of the blacks that you put into the backdrop.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that really create that contrast in learning from what the emotion is specifically saying in this. It's that it creates dimension. And within dimension allows us to take a 360-degree view of what is supposed to be felt or learned. But when something lacks dimension, when it's just a definitive number and time and structure, we lack all these other views that can be learned from it. And so as an artist, it's not about what I'm limited by, but rather looking at the unlimited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she calls it cultural homogenization, and I want to end in this. And she says it drains away opportunities for Kairos. And I began to think about homogenized milk and what they do to make it safe.
Oh, boil it.
But I mean, they literally take everything out of the milk. I mean, they boil it, they filter it, so anything that would be
good or bad.
Yeah, good or bad.
Strip it out.
Yeah, strip it out. Yep. And so because we always, and she talks about this, we always want to standardize the experience for comfort.
We've talked about this with technology. We're always trying to normalize the curve.
Yes.
Don't normalize anything. Let it be what it is. Let it be chaotic. Let it be dynamic. Let it be different and creative. Do not, I think she talked in here about squid ink risotto. Once one person has done it, it's standardized in all these fine restaurants because they know they can continue to perform on that. But the ones that really stand above that fine dining are the Michelin stars. It's the ones of deep creativity, always changing menus, very dynamic. It's not the McDonald's. It's not that normalization of life. Life is not meant to be normal. Life is meant to be experienced. Life is meant to be dynamic. Life is meant to be challenging so that you learn. But when you normalize it, you stop your learning. You stop your growth.
Yeah, we in our comfort and in our Western society, we don't want anything to disappoint us. We don't want it to be too strange. We avoid any risk because even though we love surprise, we hate it at the same time.
We don't want it to be too strange. What was that original? It was the last line that Kairos was describing back from the artistic standpoint. Read it again.
Yeah, let me find it.
You said, we don't want it to be strange. Right there.
Line.
Right there.
Why did the artist fashion you? For your sake, stranger, and he set me up in the porch as a lesson.
Why did the artist fashion you for your sake, stranger?
Right.
We don't want the strangeness.
Right.
We don't want to be met with things that were uncomfortable and that, we feel that are challenging to our own, learning or understanding. If you don't challenge and work like a mold and test and put pressure and friction and the hammer on the anvil to define what that sword of thought is going to be, you're going to live in this normalized, totally familiar world where nothing will ever be learned. The evolution stops. Chronos does not talk about evolution. All the time can be given in the world. All the time. There can be an infinite measurement of time, but it does not say that you're going to take those moments and learn from those moments within time.
Yeah, and I like how she says when you can chase or encounter Kairos. It's this ability to, when we're living in this moment. Yeah. It's this ability to live in this moment and to look for these, and we can even look for these patterns of when we've, and this is some self-reflection, and I think this is wonderful to do, and I was doing that this weekend, is When are those times, like those 2 hours you spend in your bathrobe, those flow states, and that's what they call them nowadays, you know, like whether you're a Navy SEAL and, you know, you're in battle and it's like the perfect go time and you're like just 100% present, you know, or whether you may be an artist and next thing you know, you look and it's been 12 hours and you've been painting straight, not eating nothing. You know, it's all these fleeting moments, these chasing moments that we can look at. And I like that it's ever running. I like that because then I can live my life that way.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm looking not at a schedule. I'm looking at what are these 2-hour moments of creativity that creates something new? What is this ability for me to be present in this moment with this person and show these creational laws and show love and all that?
Yeah. If you're a sailboat, how do you create movement to get somewhere?
You raise your sail.
You raise your sail. And what does a sail catch?
Wind.
Wind. The sailboat moves with creation. Does not fight it. Sailboats do not work well when you try and sail them into the wind. It becomes very hard to catch that loft in your sail. You need to move with it. If it's carrying one way, say, maybe this isn't the direction I should be heading in. Time has been leading me this way, but every other moment is moving this way. And I'm only looking at the bald head behind me in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
What I got to do is look at the face and move with it.
And when that wind is still and that water's glass, recognizing that moment. Cause and effect.
That's correct. Recognize that moment and know that you have a choice once the wind picks up.
Mm-hmm.
So let me take this moment now to reflect on what that choice is going to be. Let me really think about it before something stupid comes out of my mouth.
Yes, I better not speak anymore. Yeah. We should be done. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Jason.